Let's get the Roundtable's reaction. Oklahoma Republican Congressman Tom Cole, Minnesota Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison, Dan Senor, co-founder of the Foreign Policy Initiative, and our own Cokie Roberts. Does anyone disagree with Nate Silver?
I disagree.
Oh,
what a surprise.
What a surprise.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a snapshot in time. And if Democrats are watching this broadcast, then they need to get out on the street and start knocking some doors. I think this is going to motivate our base to really get out there and make relationships and show people that this is the folks who shut down the government. These are the folks responsible for sequester. These are the people who don't want to extend unemployment insurance. Even 10,000 people in Oklahoma have seen.
I'm glad you're so concerned.
Well, 22,000 in Minnesota have not got their unemployment insurance. This is who's responsible for that. And if you want to see more of that bad stuff, then stay at home. If not, you better get out.
Is he dreaming?
Yeah, he is, actually. and which is often the case with my friend.
Hey, you got to dream big, Tom.
And that's a very big dream on your part.
It is going to come true.
Look, I think you look for some obvious signs. The playing field here has been getting bigger rather than smaller for Republicans for months now. Places that aren't normally in play are coming into play. Most of the places that Silver ticked off are red states that the president lost badly in the last election. And finally, we've got a bellwether special election out there with Florida 13, which I think showed a lot about what the state of play is. Well, this is a district that the president carries.
Seems like there's a formula, too, right?
But they are both right. I mean, what we're seeing in our latest ABC poll is that in the 34 states where there are Senate elections up, the Republicans are up by 12 points in those 34 states. So what's the likelihood? The likelihood is the Republicans take the Senate. There is one Republican seat in play, which is Georgia. But the fact is that there are a lot of things that have to happen, and one of them is Republican primaries have to come out the way Republicans want. And now some states they can nominate yahoos and the yahoo will win, but other states if they nominate yahoos, the Democrats likely to win. So they have to be careful about that.
You got that formula?
I would say
Okay.
this is a fundamental difference from 2010 to 2012.
I know, because everybody understands that you don't
candidate
want to
recruitment has been excellent. You look at people like Tom Cotton in Arkansas, Dan Sullivan in Alaska. You just go across the spectrum. Right. In Colorado, we had a crazy right-winger who would have lost the general election. He's gotten out. Suddenly, Cory Gardner, a guy who can actually win this thing, has gotten in.
I agree. You've done a much better job.
And the insurgent groups on the right are being far more strategic. The Club for Growth, the other groups are not going after candidates. They're not actually backing candidates because they can lose general elections.
Where Keith was right was that if the Democrats, and it's an enormous if the Democrats get out their vote, which they don't do normally in off years, then they could win. But that's a big
The president's approval rating in these states is in the low 40s. No. These Senate Democrat incumbents are going to have to outperform the president's numbers by double digits. These are states that Mitt Romney won by 10 or 20 points.
Let me talk about what if the Republicans do take the Senate? What really happens? Will there be big changes? What if Ruth Bader Ginsburg retires? Can they overturn Obamacare?
Well, the president needs to decide then, does he want to spend his last 2 years in foreign travel, or does he want to seriously negotiate with the Congress of the United States? I think that's when you have an opening for some really big things that take Republican votes for the most part, but also take a Democratic signature, somewhat similar to what we had with Bill Clinton. Clinton, we got welfare reform, balanced budget. Most Democrats didn't vote for those things, but you had Republicans that pushed them through and a willing negotiating partner on the other side. If the president will do that, then I think we can actually come to grips with entitlement reform, find some common ground on some infrastructure, maybe get some tax reform. But I don't think that's going to happen with a Democratic Senate.
You mentioned the president and foreign travel. Not really a great week for the president in terms of the face-off with Vladimir Putin. We loved this from The Onion, the satirical website, penning a humorous op-ed with Putin saying it's certainly no easy task to forcefully annex an entire province against another country's will. So I just wanted to thank you, the government of the United States, the nations of Western Europe, and really the entire world population as a whole for being super cool about all of this. Now, The Onion is not alone. Congressman Ellison, is Putin getting away with murder because the world really lacks the challenge? Lacks the force?
Well, think about the options on the table. I don't think it's appropriate to steam through the Black Sea and get into World War III, perhaps. So what is the president doing? He's sanctioning leaders in Russia. He is condemning this in the strongest terms. He's mobilizing Western forces to make sure that this is condemned and stopped. And of course, no doubt about it, NATO is getting mobilized and understands that this is a high stakes thing. I mean, a few years ago when we saw action in Georgia and the Caucasus, I mean, what did George Bush do? The president is doing what it's responsible to do. And, sort of
but meanwhile, we've got all these troops on the border.
Well, exactly. And you had the foreign minister just say to you on this program that the likelihood of war was very high last week and even higher this week. That withdrawal from the base in Crimea was Fort Sumter. You know, it really was. And so that was the beginning of civil war. Now we go to civil war in Ukraine. Then what does the United States do?
There are basic things we can do. Provide small arms and ammunition to the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian government, which they're asking for, which the president hasn't provided. This administration has just provided MREs to the Ukrainians. I actually don't think they've delivered them yet.
That military is so small compared to Russia.
Missile defense capabilities in former Warsaw Pact countries that are part of NATO. Provide resources to former military resources, ground forces movements for former Warsaw Pact countries that are part of NATO. Expand the sanctions. The Magnitsky Act has hundreds of Russians we can be sanctioning. The administration has sanctioned a handful of them.
I'm not saying that you are wrong. What I'm saying is that this Republican attacking the president, suggesting that he's weak, is absolutely counterproductive, and that if we want to look,
this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. There are Democrats. There are Democrats who share my position.
No, I agree, but I think the president needs to get the support of this country and move forward together with all the
Republicans don't write the onion. I mean, look, this has been an administration from the reset to the cancellation of the agreements that we had with Poland and the Czech Republic on missile defense to Syria that frankly has been outthought and outmaneuvered pretty consistently by Putin. And I think that's why we're here. And I agree that there are limits to what he can do. Nobody's talking about putting troops on the ground. But I think you really want to catch their attention. I'd go back to something Dan said. You reopen negotiations with the Poles and the Czechs about anti-ballistic missile defense. That's the one card I think we have to play that really wakes them up in Moscow.
And just quickly on the Republican Party, this has really sort of split the Republican Party.
Yes. Well, I think that the Republican Party, there has been this debate about whether or not the Republican Party is shifting to some sort of quasi-isolationism, debate over the NSA, debate over drones, debate over Syria. What's striking about Putin is there's been a correction. Whereas Rand Paul was initially quite critical of Republicans who are going back to Cold War rhetoric. And then you watch where the party went. You watch where Ted Cruz went. He's a good bellwether for where the base is. He was extremely critical of the president on Russia and Ukraine, and suddenly Rand Paul has moved to a more muscular position. So I actually think this whole notion that neo-isolationist politics on the right is paralyzing the right's foreign policy is overstated.
Well, because once you start taking over parts of countries, it changes the whole equation.
It certainly does.